If you're feeling alone in this world, this story will change you forever. Have you ever sat in a room full of noise and still felt invisible? Have you ever gone a whole week and realized no one asked how you were doing? Have you ever wondered if you are simply meant to carry everything alone? What if the loneliness you feel is not a life sentence, but a habit you can break, one small choice at a time? Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because on this channel we share powerful life stories that teach lessons about courage, patience, connection, and hope. This story may change the way you look at loneliness forever. In a small town where the roads were made of dust and the evening smelled of wood smoke, there lived a woman named Grace. Grace was a seamstress. She had clever hands and a quiet voice. She had also, 3 years earlier, buried her husband. Since that day, Grace had built walls, not walls of brick, walls made of silence. If a neighbor knocked, she said she was busy. If her sister called, she let the phone ring. If someone invited her to a wedding, a birthday, a simple Sunday lunch, she found a reason to stay home. She told herself no one truly understood her grief. She told herself people were better off without her sadness. She told herself it was easier this way. It was not easier, it was just quieter. Grace's small shop sat at the end of the market road. Customers came for hems and buttons, and they left quickly, because Grace rarely smiled and never lingered in conversation. She kept her head down over the sewing machine. The hum of the machine became the only voice she heard most days. Her sister Faith tried. Faith visited every few weeks, bringing bread, bringing news, bringing warmth Grace did not ask for. Each time, Grace answered in short sentences. Each time, Faith left a little more tired. Each time, the space between them grew a little wider. One evening, Faith stopped coming. Grace told herself she did not mind. She told herself she preferred it. She told herself again and again until the words stopped meaning anything at all. Years passed this way. Grace's world grew smaller, her shop, her small room above it, her own thoughts circling the same grief, the same fear, the same silence. She stopped going to church because people asked too many questions there. She stopped going to the market square because laughter reminded her of what she had lost. She stopped answering letters because letters required her to say something true. One afternoon, a young girl from down the road ran past Grace's window, laughing, chasing a paper kite. Grace watched her for a long moment. She could not remember the last time she had laughed like that. She could not remember the last time anyone had laughed near her at all. That night Grace sat alone with a cup of tea gone cold. She thought of her husband. She thought of her sister. She thought of the girl and her kite. And for the first time in years, she felt the full weight of what she had built. Not protection, a prison. She had built it herself, brick by silent brick, and no one else had laid a single stone. That thought terrified her. The low point came on Grace's birthday. She had not told anyone the date, not on purpose, but out of habit, the same habit that had cost her every relationship, one small refusal at a time. No cake sat on her table. No card waited by her door. No knock came, not even Faith's. Grace sat at her sewing table long after dark, the machine silent, her hands empty. She counted the years since she had truly spoken to another person, not about hems or buttons, but about her heart. She counted, and the number frightened her. For the first time, Grace did not know what to say, even to herself. She looked around the small room, fabric scraps, a cold teapot, a photograph of her husband smiling from a life that felt borrowed from someone else. She realized, slowly and quietly, that the loneliness she blamed on the world had been built by her own 2 hands. She had no one to call because she had stopped answering the phone. She had no one to visit because she had stopped opening her door. She had no one to grieve with because she had pushed away every hand that reached for hers. For the first time, Grace understood. The next morning, Grace walked to the edge of town, past the market, past the church, to the old baobab tree where the elders often sat. Under its shade sat an old man named Mr. Wusu, a retired schoolteacher known for his patience and his quiet wisdom. Grace did not plan to speak, but the old man looked at her, really looked at her, and asked one question. "When did you last let someone carry something for you?" Grace opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She could not think of a single time. Mr. Wusu nodded slowly as if he already knew the answer. He did not scold her. He did not pity her. He simply spoke in the plain way of a man who had lived long enough to know what mattered. "Loneliness," he said, "is not something that happens to you. It is something you feed one closed door at a time." Grace looked down at her hands, the hands that sewed for strangers but had stopped reaching for family. "You do not need a crowd," Mr. Wusu said. "You need one small habit. Every day greet 3 people, not with your eyes down, with your eyes up. Ask them one true question and listen to the answer." It sounded too small to matter. Grace almost said so. But she had tried her own way for 3 years, and her own way had left her alone on her birthday, counting cold tea and empty chairs. So she nodded. She did not promise much, but she decided to try. The next morning, Grace stepped outside her shop and greeted the fruit seller across the road. Her voice came out stiff, almost a whisper. The fruit seller blinked, surprised, and gave a short nod back. That was all. Grace went home feeling foolish. She almost gave up. The day after, she tried again. She greeted the fruit seller, then the boy who swept the church steps. The boy did not answer. He simply stared, unsure why the quiet seamstress was suddenly speaking to him. Grace failed again. She told herself Mr. Wusu's habit was too small to fix anything so large. But she remembered her birthday, the cold tea, the silence, and she tried once more. On the 3rd day, Grace greeted the fruit seller, the church boy, and an old woman selling baskets by the roadside. This time, the old woman smiled and asked about Grace's stitching. They spoke for 5 whole minutes, about thread, about weather, about nothing important at all. It was the first real conversation Grace had had in longer than she could remember. Something in her chest loosened just slightly, not healed, just loosened. Days became weeks. Grace kept greeting 3 people every single day, rain or shine, tired or not. Slowly, she asked real questions. "How is your mother's cough? Did your daughter pass her exams?" Slowly. She began to listen, not just to answer but to remember. Neighbors began to notice. The fruit seller started saving Grace the ripest mango. The church boy waved before Grace could speak first. The basket seller began stopping by the shop just to talk. Weeks became months. One afternoon, without fully planning it, Grace wrote a short letter to her sister, Faith. It was not long. It simply said, "I have missed you more than I let myself admit. Can we talk?" Faith arrived at Grace's door within the hour, eyes already wet. Months became a year. Grace began attending church again, sitting near the back at first, then closer, then finally beside Faith, every single Sunday. She began inviting the basket seller for tea. She began remembering birthdays, not just her own, but everyone else's. The sewing machine's hum was no longer the only voice in her life. Now there was laughter. Now there was conversation. Now there was noise, real noise, the kind that comes from people who choose to stay. Years later, Grace was known throughout the town as the woman who never let anyone eat alone. If a widow moved in nearby, Grace was the first to knock. If a stranger sat alone at a wedding, Grace was the one who pulled a chair beside them. If a child looked lost in the market, Grace crouched down and asked their name. She still sewed hems and buttons, but now customers lingered. Now they talked. Now Grace's shop was filled with the sound of people who felt, for a moment, truly seen. One evening, near her birthday, Grace sat at her table, and this time it was full. Faith sat beside her. The basket seller brought a small cake. The fruit seller's children ran laughing through the doorway, chasing a paper kite. Mr. Wusu, now older and slower, came to sit under her window for a while, as he often did. Grace brought him tea and sat beside him. "You were right," she said quietly. "It was never about the world leaving me alone. It was about the doors I chose to close." Mr. Wusu simply smiled, the smile of a man who had watched a small seed grow into something whole. Grace reached for his hand, and for a long, quiet moment, neither of them needed to say anything else. Listen closely, because this is the heart of it. Loneliness is rarely something that happens to you. More often, it is something you build, one small refusal at a time, one skipped call, one unopened door, one quiet "I'm fine" when you were not fine at all. Real strength is not standing alone and calling it independence. Real strength is opening the door, even when your hands are shaking. You do not need 100 friends to feel less alone. You need one small habit repeated with honesty. Greet someone, ask a true question, listen to the answer, do it again tomorrow. Grace did not fix her loneliness with a speech or a miracle or a single perfect day. She fixed it 3 greetings at a time, the same way a single thread, pulled again and again, becomes a whole garment. So let me ask you what Mr. Wusu asked Grace under that old tree. When did you last let someone carry something for you? And just as important, when did you last carry something for someone else? Tell us in the comments, what is one small door you want to open again starting today? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to know they are not as alone as they feel. Because in the end, loneliness is not the absence of people around you. It is the presence of doors you have not yet opened. Open one today.